Story 1. The idea that someday my mental health will worsen to the point where something breaks and I do something unforgivable. Story 2. You know those videos of people crawling deep into extremely narrow caves? To be clear, I'm not scared of other small spaces or the dark, but something about the idea of being surrounded by immovable rock and not being able to move anymore, ugh. Story 3. Cockroaches. I know they can't harm you and that I am much taller than them, but they scare me to my very core. This is especially true when you live in the South and encounter the much larger kind that enter your house frequently, requiring regular extermination. Story 4. Death, not the process of dying, but rather the non-existence that comes after. 5 days ago, this realization suddenly hit me that one day this consciousness that I am will be gone. I have not been the same since. It is constantly on my mind. I cannot shake it. I go to sleep with it and wake up with it. I really hope it does not stay. None of the usual rationalizations help, such as thinking, I didn't mind not being born. I won't mind non-existence after I am dead. In fact, that all just makes it worse somehow. I feel in constant terror about it. It feels truly like I have realized something I should not have, and I just want to go back to the reality where I hadn't yet. For the first time in my 32 years on Earth, I woke up thinking, oh, it wasn't a nightmare. This is real and the feeling of dread is still there. Story 5. Sometimes I fear that I will die without contributing something valuable and creating an impact in the lives of others. I don't want to waste my days living without purpose. Story 6. Locked-in syndrome. I experienced a taste of it after a cesarean section. They administered a medication and told me it would help with the pain so I could sleep. Instead, I could hear everything and everyone talking and feel every pulse of pain, but I could not move or scream. It was probably the scariest hour of my life. I don't know how long it lasted, but your mind goes to strange places when you're in so much pain and can't move. Story 7. The prospect of experiencing a panic attack while engaged in a dangerous activity that requires focus is a genuine concern for me, as I have post-traumatic stress disorder. Story 8. Nausea and vomiting. When I feel nauseous, my anxiety rises to a level of 9 out of 10, and I find myself pleading with God not to be sick. It's very frightening. I would prefer to experience labor contractions rather than vomit. Story 9. America is becoming a theocracy. I have lost most of my family to the cruelty and ignorance of religious conservatism. It is a Boothiel that is constantly searching for a vulnerable target. Story 10. Becoming paralyzed or suffering brain damage can result in your body not cooperating with your desired self in significant ways. Story 11. Not getting my girlfriend to the emergency room in time if she overdoses is literally my worst fear, and I almost experienced it in December. Finding a good hospital nearby is challenging, and usually we have to travel 20 minutes away. I am praying she stays healthy and free from self-harm. She means everything to me, and I refuse to lose her. Story 12. I am unsure what to call it, but to paint a picture for you, imagine being in the ocean and having a gigantic ship coming right at you. If you watch Leave the World Behind, the scene where the ship comes to shore, the angle that shows looking up at the ship embodies my biggest fear. I don't know why, but that really frightens me. Story 13. Death is not something I fear because of the process itself. I do not fear the actual moment of death. What I fear is everything I will miss out on once I am gone. Story 14. There is a constant fear that a dangerous man may approach and harm me while I'm out walking, especially at night. Story 15. Dementia. Forgetting who I love and most of my life is something that panics me when I think about it. I work in a dementia ward, and I've seen people turn into shadows of who they once were. Story 16. Audience participation. A fire at my building while I am out and I can't get my dog keeps me awake at night sometimes. Story 17. Getting stuck in a really tight space, but more specifically head first, genuinely makes me dizzy. The thought of it is indescribably unsettling. Story 18. Anything involving eyes is terrifying. Getting stabbed in the eye, shot in the eye, an eye popping out, or eye bleeding is distressing. Story 19. Falling into the sky. Have you ever lain on your back on a clear day and stared at the sky for a while? I've done that a couple of times in my life, and at some point, I would lose my sense of up and down and have a sudden fear of falling upwards. It's a strange feeling, but that endless abyss is terrifying. Story 20. Large, fast-moving wheels or gears cause me crippling anxiety. Things like carousels and large moving gears for ships terrify me. There's a scene in Titanic where they speed up the ship, and the large levers in the boiler room start moving quickly, which frightens me. I also dislike thinking about the wheels on semi-trucks. I can't explain it. Story 21. Dying. I don't fear being alive, and I don't consciously fear being dead. But the transition between the two scares me just a bit. Story 22. Not exactly a phobia, but drowning is a terrible thought for me. It's ironic, as I was a submariner for several years and also a scuba diver. Story 23. Being struck while briefly and unavoidably being in an open space during a thunderstorm is concerning. I'm not exactly sure why this fear has intensified with age or why the southeastern state I live in seems to attract the most violent storms. It almost makes me feel helpless. Story 24. I do not want anyone to feel obligated to care for me in old age. I have a plan for later in life. Story 25. Heights can make me nervous. Just watching the trailer for the movie Fall made me start shaking. Story 26. The number of times I have quit playing Subnautica and Outer Wilds because the deep waters are absolutely terrifying to me. Story 27. I am gaining weight and feeling lost or unsure of my direction. I use my GPS even when I already know the route, just in case a road is closed and I need to take a detour. Story 28. If there is a phobia of lacking true autonomy, that is a concern. A few months ago, I reached my first milestone of independence by securing a more stable job. However, I am still working towards the next goal. Getting a car so I can travel freely whenever I choose. The next step is to move into my own house, ensuring that rent does not consume half of my paycheck. I also have a fear of not being able to breathe. I can hold my breath underwater for 15 to 20 seconds, but if I feel even the slightest pressure in my chest, I resurface immediately. Story 29. Hurting someone's feelings accidentally and never knowing. I also experience a feeling of emptiness when I'm near large bodies of water. It's harder to resist than it should be. Story 30. Being placed in an elderly care facility in the future is not ideal. I would prefer assisted living in the comfort of my home. I am grateful that we have that option in Milwaukee. Story 31. I am terrified of hitting a child while driving through suburban areas. Highways are not a problem for obvious reasons. Story 32. Drowning. You do not die because you hold your breath for so long that you pass out. You die because you can no longer hold your breath, breathe in water, and suffocate, all while knowing you are going to die. It seems like a terrible way to die. Story 33. Losing my mind to dementia. I am losing the ability to think and care for myself. I feel like a shell of my body, with me no longer in control. Story 34. This may sound unusual compared to other comments, but stairs are challenging for me. They make my legs weak and cause tunnel vision. I avoid them at all costs, especially now that I have a weak knee that makes using stairs more difficult. Story 35. I was on a submarine tour and we visited an abyssal cliff. You can only see the cliff and darkness while being 150 feet down. It was terrifying. Story 36. Anger, particularly when someone is mad at me without explaining why, deeply affects me. I am already afraid of loud or sudden noises and disappointment, so when someone yells at me and shows visible disappointment, it terrifies me. When I am yelled at, it can take me days or even months to recover. I am also fearful of my own anger. I worry that I might disappoint someone if I express even the slightest anger towards them. When I do show anger, which is rare, I find myself apologizing repeatedly as if I have committed an unforgivable act. I am genuinely scared of any sign of anger, no matter how small. Story 37. Being alone. Not alone physically, but alone in the sense of knowing there is nobody for me, nobody who cares for me, nothing. That scares me. Story 38. Sepsis is a serious condition that scares me. I have never known anyone who has experienced it, but just the thought of it is frightening. I can't even handle a small scratch without worrying about the potential consequences. Story 39. I do not fear death itself, but I fear two things after death: having no one show up to my funeral and not being accepted into heaven. Story 40. Rats and mice. My mother told me I was in a crib at a friend's house, and a rat was crawling up my crib. Just the thought is frightening me. Apparently, our dog Skeeter attacked and killed it before it reached me. Our son asked, "Do you have this phobia because of that experience? Or were you too young to remember it? So you developed the phobia because your mom told you it happened?" I don't know, but I am so terrified that I saw a mouse in the house and slept in my husband's work van for 3 months. I couldn't stand the thought of them crawling on me. Just thinking about this is sending me into a panic. Story 41. Every time I go to the bathroom, I worry that I will wake up in bed and actually be wetting my pants. So far, it has happened twice in the last 15 years. Story 42. I have mild claustrophobia, which worsens when I think about being trapped. The worst part is that it can disrupt my sleep, especially if my subconscious plays tricks on me in my dreams, like the thought of being buried alive and inhaling dirt while suffocating. During my magnetic resonance imaging scan, when they asked about my claustrophobia, I said no. I almost panicked during the procedure, telling myself, this isn't so bad, could be worse. When they pulled me out, they mentioned that I had done a good job of holding still. I explained that I had claustrophobia, but I knew that if I had admitted it, they might have pulled me out and then stuck me back in again. I later learned that covering my eyes helped because it allowed me to imagine the open space above me as empty rather than just inches from my face. That made a significant difference. Story 43. My kids are in the water, and even with a life jacket on, I picture them slipping out of the jacket and sinking. It gives me the worst feeling of anxiety. I have made my son take swim lessons for 3 summers in a row because of it. My daughter is too young for swim lessons, but next summer she will be taking them as well. Story 44. Being in a public aquarium with the possibility of one of the tanks breaking and all those live fish around me feels concerning. The likelihood is probably minimal, but the chance of it happening to me is negligible. Therefore, I choose not to visit. Story 45. There is a slim chance of it happening, but pregnancy is a concern. The only benefit of being perceived as unattractive is avoiding that risk, which terrifies me. Story 46. Mirrors. Ever since I was little, I've always felt like there was something watching me from the other side of the glass. There was a time when I refused to go into a public bathroom alone if there was no one else there because I didn't want to be surrounded by mirrors by myself. I still won't have a mirror in my bedroom. I can't sleep at all with one in there. The worst are those full-length mirrors. Story 47. I'm afraid of centipedes. Those creatures scare me. All those legs they have, especially if you wake up and see one on your ceiling. You'd be too scared to throw a shoe at it. And if you miss, you have to keep your night light on until you find it. Story 48. Heights and pregnancy. As a biologist, I know that a pregnant person's belly isn't going to pop like a water balloon, but I am terrified of pregnant people when they are around me, as well as the thought of becoming pregnant. I have great respect for those who do become pregnant or want to. It just freaks me out. Story 49. Pregnancy and childbirth require tremendous strength and courage. I have great respect for those who go through it, but I would prefer to face a serious injury instead. Story 50. Absolutely nothing other than wasps and hornets. I have somewhat of a proof. One time at my grandmother's house, I was using the restroom, and between my feet, from under the porcelain toilet, a huge black scorpion emerged and ran towards the cabinets in front of me. I only saw it once. It was already between my feet, and it did nothing to me. The same thing happened with 2 huge centipedes in that same place. When we arrived, my mother and I cleaned out the sofas to prepare them for sleeping, and 2 enormous centipedes crawled up the part you rest your back against when you sit. My mother almost fainted, but my heart didn't skip a beat. From that moment on, I became the brave one in the family. That was until a single wasp landed on my sandwich when we were at a tavern the next day. I have no clue what happened to me, but it felt as if the spirits of all my ancestors cried out in unison that the wasp had formally and thoroughly laid claim to the entire table, and that I should get up and walk away. So that's what I do when a wasp says hello. Bees are friendly. They don't bother me. Wasps are nature's joke. Story 51. Pregnancy and childbirth. If I ever get pregnant and cannot terminate, I am serious about my feelings. People think I am being silly when I say I have a significant fear of being pregnant, but it is true. Story 52. Unwanted pregnancy and heights. It's funny because I like roller coasters. Also, suffocating or drowning to death. I've almost drowned, and it scarred me for life. Story 53. Even after living for 7 decades, I still feel anxious around bees. However, there was a time long ago when I managed to escape from my captors during a military exercise and jumped into the only bush in a field. It was full of flowers and honeybees. Somehow, I just squatted there and watched the bees fly around, completely uninterested in me. Eventually, I crawled out and continued my escape. I still dislike bees flying around me. Story 54. Pregnancy is an idea that I find hard to understand. The thought of something growing inside of you is unsettling to me. Story 55. Everything to do with getting older. Looking in the mirror and not recognizing myself, having Alzheimer's, my body slowly stops working and experiencing pain everywhere. I'm 29 now, and I would like to live until around 70. Story 56. I have a fear that one day something will happen to my dog. I have seen videos where dogs suddenly cannot stand or walk. One moment they are fine and then something goes wrong. My dog is 10 years old and is literally my best friend. Story 57. Nuclear bombs evoke a strong fear in me, not only due to their appearance but also because of their potential to cause extinction-level events. The combination of bomb sirens, mushroom clouds, and the idea of vaporization deeply unsettles me. Story 58. Most birds, especially those with long necks or legs. Additionally, my parents are experiencing dementia and Alzheimer's, and I do not feel strong enough to care for them myself. Story 59. Ang malaglag mula sa mataas na lugar. Lagi kong napapanaginipan na nahuhulog ako mula sa mataas na lugar. Story 60. Being bombed or mortared is a terrifying experience. I don't care how tough you think you are. It will rattle you to your core. Story 61. I guess it would be cave exploration, especially underwater cave exploration. Just imagine the batteries of your lights dying or being stuck between the walls without being able to move. But on a more daily basis, it's the fear of heights. Story 62. My father. I am in my late 30s. Still, if I hear any sudden noises of something breaking, it reminds me of my father throwing glasses or plates and my mother crying. Story 63. Fire can be terrifying, especially after experiencing a house fire at 19, which led to post-traumatic stress disorder. The smell, the heat, and everything related to that experience can trigger a complete shutdown. Additionally, I genuinely fear death and the concept of non-existence. Story 64. Getting cancer is a concern. Even if it is easily treatable, I would struggle to afford it. I am only 25, but I am at a higher risk for it. Story 65. It may seem trivial, but I struggle with conflict. I am prone to conflict avoidance, and the thought of confrontation stresses me out significantly. It may sound silly, but I fear it more than heights, water, or anything else that might seem rational. Just the thought of an argument or someone raising their voice at me makes my heart race. Story 66. This might seem strange, but one of my biggest fears is being accused of plagiarism, a word I struggle to spell. It has plagued my university career and, as an aspiring writer, it remains an ongoing concern. Just hearing the word makes me anxious, and in intense moments, I worry about how I will move forward in a world where it exists. Story 67. Needles are the surgical type used for injections. This is ironic because my ears are pierced, and I have a septum piercing. Story 68. People decide to leave one day, whether by emotionally detaching, ending social connections, or dealing with the fear of abandonment. There is also the underlying fear that my presence is a burden on those around me. Given full freedom from their inner niceness or extreme people-pleasing, they might leave me faster than I can process this thought. So yes, story 69. I am afraid of the possibility of drowning, to the point that even though I am in a 5-foot pool, where I cannot touch the ground, I immediately panic. I also know how to swim and float. Story 70. My biggest fear is reaching a point in life where my parents are no longer around. They have sacrificed so much for me, and the thought of not being able to spoil them or make them proud while I still can weighs heavily on me. It drives many of my decisions and work ethic. I want to use the time I have now to build a stable and meaningful career, not just for myself, but so I can give back to them while they are here to enjoy it. Story 71. Deeply loving someone who doesn't reciprocate is difficult. I fear spending the rest of my life without finding that deep love, where both individuals care for each other and work towards building that connection. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.